A man from Ulverston was sentenced to 4.5 years in prison, Preston Crown Court, for robbery offences. Nathan Cooper, 26, of Baytree Road, Ulverston, was jailed for robbery, attempt robbery and coercive substance offences. Mr Cooper pleaded guilty for the offences at an earlier hearing. The court heard how on the 26th of July 2024, Mr Cooper entered a premises in Market Street in Ulverston carrying a bottle of ammonia and threatened to throw acid in a staff member's face before demanding the till to be opened. He took £50 in cash. In a separate incident also on the 26th of July, Mr Cooper entered another premises in Ulverston telling the shop owner, "I've got ammonia, where's your till?" Thankfully no one was harmed in either incident. A man from Barrow has been jailed for 3 years and has been placed on the offenders register for offences against children. Jordan Ems, aged 38, of Barrow in Furness, appeared at Preston Crown Court and was sentenced for assault by touching and inciting a child to engage in activities. A jury found Mr Ems guilty of all the charges against him after a 6-day trial at Preston Crown Court in November 2024. The offences took place in Ulverston and relate to incidences involving one victim between 2018 and 2020. Detective Sergeant Mike Wallace said Mr Ems maintained that he had not committed these offences. However, a jury concluded that he was guilty. I hope the outcome of this trial and the sentence given to Mr Ems today can provide the victim with some reassurance that justice has been done. I would encourage anyone who has been a victim of abuse to contact the police so that our officers can investigate. Your report will be dealt with sensitively and professionally, and you will be supported throughout our investigation. A man who murdered his partner, Tiffany Render, aged 34, in Whitehaven, has been jailed for life. Irwin, aged 50, of George Street, Whitehaven, was sentenced at Carlisle's Crown Court following a trial in November. Been sentenced to life imprisonment in prison with a minimum term of 32 years in prison. The court heard how on the 22nd of March 2024, police received a call from Northwest Ambulance Service shortly before midnight requesting assistance for a 34-year-old woman in cardiac arrest. Miss Render had been at Paul Irwin's address that evening and at some point suffered an injury which caused a substantial bleed, causing her to suffer a cardiac arrest resulting in her death. Officers arrived at the scene and Mr Irwin was arrested on suspicion of murder. Investigations revealed that Mr Irwin contacted a member of his family at 11:37 p.m. prior to contacting NWAS, telling them that Tiffany is in bed and she's dead. Mr Irwin was also sentenced for an offence of sexual assault where he received a 15-year sentence to be served concurrently. Mr Irwin was placed on the sex offenders register for life. Detective Constable Lisa Baker said, "Pleased that Paul Irwin has been convicted of the murder of Tiffany Render and he will now spend a significant amount of time in prison for what he did. This is a tragic loss of life and no one should have to suffer at the hands of their partner in such a horrific way. My thoughts remain with Tiffany's family and friends at this incredibly difficult time. We know that no sentence passed will be able to bring Tiffany back, but I do hope that the sentence passed today can go some way in giving them some sort of closure, knowing that Mr Irwin is now behind bars for what he did to Tiffany." DC Barker continued, "Our officers are committed to tackling all types of domestic abuse, prosecuting those responsible, and working with partner agencies to support victims and survivors. If you are a victim of domestic abuse, are affected by domestic abuse, or know someone who is suffering, you will be taken seriously. We will take action. We will support you." In a statement released by Tiffany's mother after sentencing, she said, "Firstly, we would like to thank Cumbria Police for all their hard work and commitment to my daughter's case, particularly the support given by our family liaison officers. Also, I would like to thank the jury who had a very difficult task. Thank you. To all our prosecuting counsel, everyone was so professional, very caring, and very aware of how difficult this whole process has been. I would also like to thank the press for sensible reporting of this case and respecting our wishes. No sentence will ever make up for our loss, but we feel we have justice for Tiffany." Two men have been jailed at Carlisle's Crown Court for county line drug dealing. Stephen Willoughby, 31, of no fixed address, was sentenced to 4 years for concern of the supply of Class A drugs. At an earlier hearing, Ross Blacklock, 25 of Durham Hill Road, Carlisle, was sentenced to 3 years and 3 months for possession with intent to supply Class A, concern of the supply of heroin, and concern of the supply of crack cocaine. He was also sentenced for separate offences of theft, ABH, criminal damage, and 3 accounts of assault on an emergency worker. Mr. Willoughby pleaded guilty to the offences. Intelligence identified that a mobile number used in Merseyside, named the Bentley Line, was supplying cocaine and heroin in the Botcherby area of Carlisle. On the 18th of January, officers conducted proactive patrols in the area of St Aidan's in relation to the Bentley Line and witnessed 2 males on a push bike in the area of South Henry Street, then returning to Hoe Street and Close Street. Officers continued their patrols and seen the males entering a property on Howe Street. One of the males was then seen travelling along Greystone Road, Carlisle, to a nude agent. Officers entered the nude agent and detained the male, who was identified as Ross Blacklock, and carried out a stop and search where 17 wraps of brown powder, 12 wraps of white powder, and a mobile phone were located. The second male wasn't located. However, on the 19th of January, whilst off duty in Carlisle City, officers witnessed the second male having recognised him from patrols the previous day. Officers attended and detained the male identified as Stephen Willoughby. He was searched and officers located a mobile phone with a background of 2 local nominals. He was arrested and officers seized a wrap of cannabis and over £100 in cash. The phone was examined and messages were discovered showing Mr. Willoughby being involved in a supply of Class A and contained a number 047 which was identified as in contact with the Bentley Line. Numerous messages were found offering the supply of heroin and crack cocaine, with bulk messages sent to a large number of contacts. Officers also examined Mr. Blacklock's phone, also showed a number of messages showing his involvement in the supply of Class A drugs. The data showed contact between Mr. Blacklock and Mr. Willoughby and the Bentley Line number. A number of messages were also found from the Bentley Line directing to Mr. Blacklock to attend an address in Carlisle, which indicated him being directly by Mr. Willoughby. Investigating the case, Detective Constable James Bonus said, thanks to the proactive patrols following intelligence on the Bentley Line operating in Botcherby, officers were able to arrest Mr. Blacklock and Mr. Willoughby. Searches found drugs and examination of mobile phones located showed their involvement in the Bentley Line, supplying Class A drugs in Carlisle. We contempt for county line drugs criminals exploiting and targeting our communities, and we will do everything in our power to put an end to these gangs. A burglar has been jailed for more than 3.5 years after targeting homes in the Barrow area. Darren Hughes, 51 of Newton Road, Dalton, pleaded guilty to a burglary on Schneider Road, Mr. Barrow, which occurred on the 19th of July 2024, and he asked the court to take into account a guilty plea of 2 further burglaries on Schneider Road and Low White Close, occurred in July 2024, together with an attempted burglary in June 2024 on Durham Street, Barrow in Furness. Mr. Hughes also pleaded guilty to 2 offences of handling stolen goods, when found to be in possession of items taken from 2 further burglaries in the Barrow area. He was sentenced at Preston Crown Court to 45 months in prison, reduced from 5 years due to an early guilty plea. The court heard how Mr. Hughes went on a spree of residential burglaries over several months in the Barrow area. He would force entry into people's homes before stealing jewellery, clothing, passports, cash and other items. The court heard from victims of these offences who spoke Mr. Hughes had caused them and the anxiety they felt as a result of his actions. Detective Constable Emma Mullen said, Mr. Hughes is a prolific burglar who has caused a great deal of heartache for victims in the Barrow area. Cumbria police recognise the impact of burglary on our communities, and I am pleased with the outcome at court, which has resulted in 1 more burglar off the streets. I would like to thank the victims and witnesses for their support, which enabled our team of detectives to recover many of the stolen items and bring this prolific burglar to court and ultimately to prison. A man who caused the death of a driver following a road traffic collision in Stanwick Bank in Carlisle has been sentenced to prison. David Devoy, 54 of Knightswood, Sunderland, caused the death of 50-year-old Neil Errington in Carlisle in a crash which occurred on the 2nd of May 2022. The court heard how on April the 5th, Mr. Devoy was the driver of a car involved in a single collision on West Tower Street in Carlisle. Following this collision, Mr. Devoy surrendered his license to the police constable attending the scene, as he had shown signs of having suffered a medical episode at the wheel prior to the collision. The police constable then contacted the DVLA, and on the 25th of April, Mr. Devoy's license was officially revoked by the DVLA, who wrote to Mr. Devoy to inform him of such. However, on the 2nd of May 2022, Mr. Devoy collected a new BMW car from a dealership in Carlisle, driving away at 3:56 p.m. This after fraudulently applying for a new driving license. At 4 p.m, Mr. Devoy was witnessed driving erratically on Scotland Road in Carlisle before colliding with the rear of a Fiat Punto several times. He was then seen to speed up. At 4:02 p.m, Mr. Devoy's BMW was involved in a second collision, this time a fatal collision. Witnesses saw Mr. Devoy's BMW approached Mr. Errington's Mercedes car, at times on the wrong side of the road and speeding well in excess of the speed limit. Witnesses said Mr. Devoy made no attempt to brake or steer away from the Mercedes before colliding with the rear of the car, which was stationary at the traffic lights. Mr. Errington suffered serious injuries and was taken to the Royal Victoria Infirmary in Newcastle. He remained there in critical condition but died on the 12th of May. The same police constable who attended Mr. Devoy's crash on the 5th of April also attended the scene on the 2nd of May and immediately recognised Mr. Devoy. Mr. Devoy told the police that he believed he had suffered a medical episode at the wheel, having suffered from epilepsy for many years. He said that he had taken his epilepsy medication on the morning of the crash. He also stated in his police interview that he believed his driving licence had been returned to him prior to the fatal collision. A forensic collision investigation report concluded that Mr. Devoy's vehicle was travelling at between 76 and 81 miles per hour at the point of impact with the Mercedes. Mr. Devoy admitted causing death by dangerous driving and 2 counts of fraud by false representation. He was sentenced to 6 years and 8 months in prison and disqualified from driving for 13 years and 4 months. Detective Constable Claire Watman of Cumbria Police's Serious Collision Investigation Unit said David Devoy's decision to go out and buy a new car so soon after his previous collision, after having his licence revoked by the DVLA, was reckless and selfish. Mr. Devoy's driving on the 2nd of May was dangerously out of control and ultimately cost Neil Errington his life. Had Mr. Devoy taken his responsibilities as a driver more seriously after his previous medical episode at the wheel, abided by the decision of the DVLA to revoke his license, Neil would still be with us today. Any driver who suffers from a medical condition or disability that could affect their driving must abide by doctor's advice, and they must inform DVLA. I would like to thank all those who provided information to assist the investigation, and to extend my deepest condolences on behalf of Cumbria Constabulary to Neil's loved ones. A man has been sentenced for breaching a sexual harm prevention order. Richard Cook, 56, of no fixed address, was sentenced to 2 years. The court heard that Mr. Cook had breached his sexual harm prevention order on the 29th of February in Barrow whilst released on temporary licence. It was in relation to the following condition of his order, in which he is prohibited from having any unsupervised contact or communication of any kind, including via the internet or mobile phone, with any male child under the age of 16 years old, other than such as is inadvertent as not reasonably avoidable in the course of lawful daily life, with the explicit consent of the child's parent or guardian who has knowledge of his criminal convictions, or with the express written permission of the social services for the area you are residing. Detective Constable Dan Chadwick, the investigating officer from the MSSOVO team, said Mr. Cook was fully aware of the terms of his harm prevention order imposed against him when he formed a friendship with a child, unsupervised contact. I would like to thank the family for their support, who were unaware of Mr. Cook's order. Their support helped to ensure that he was held accountable for his actions. We work hard to monitor and manage people who are, like in this case, we will find out if they breach the terms of orders and take swift action to ensure that our communities are safe. 2 men were jailed following a burglary in Workington. Joshua Nicholson, aged 28, Small Road, Salterbeck, was sentenced to 41 months in prison for burglary and resisting arrest. Ricky Rayson, aged 36, of Allecton Road, Frizzington, was sentenced to 7 months in prison for handling stolen goods. Both were also given 10-year restraining orders preventing them from contacting the victim in any shape or form. On the 24th of May 2024, police received a phone call reporting a burglary at a residential property in Workington. That in the early hours of the morning, her living room window had been on the latch and she had seen a man start to open the window and climb in. When asked what he was doing, the man then disappeared from sight. The victim then heard a knock at the door, and while she was walking to the door, someone had climbed into her window and stolen her handbag with £500 inside, along with her bank cards. Police attended the address and noticed a footprint inside the living room and fingerprints on the ledge of the window. CCTV obtained showed Mr. Nicholson and Mr. Rayson fleeing from the address. Both were arrested. During the arrest of Mr. Nicholson, he violently resisted arrest, resulting in a member of the public assisting officers to detain him. DC Simon Quinn said, Mr. Nicholson and Mr. Rayson took advantage of a vulnerable victim for their own gain. Burglary offences will not be tolerated, and those that engage in these activities will face a police investigation and prosecution. Crimes of this nature, where someone enters your home address and steals your belongings, can have a devastating impact on the victim, and preventing and bringing burglars to justice remains a priority for Cumbria Constabulary. I would also like to thank the member of the public who assisted officers so that they could safely arrest Mr. Nicholson. We would like to remind people to stay vigilant to burglaries and report any suspicious persons or activities to the police via our online reporting form, chat or 101, or if a crime is occurring on 999. A man has been jailed for 16 years after admitting 9 offences against children. Darren Richmond, aged 41 from Barrow, pleaded guilty to the charges brought against him at an earlier hearing, which included charges of attempting to communicate with a child. He was sentenced to 16 years in prison at Preston Crown Court. The offences occurred between 2010 and 2013 relating to one victim. The offence relating to attempting to communicate with a child online occurred in 2024 relating to a decoy account. Mr. Richmond also received an additional 5 years of extended licence due to seriousness of the offences and has been placed on the sex offenders registers for life with a sexual harm prevention order. Detective Constable Faye Huddleston said, I would like to acknowledge the bravery of the victim for reporting these offences to the police. I can only imagine what a horrendous experience this was. I am pleased with the sentence given out by the courts today. Mr. Richmond is a predator, and I can only hope that seeing him go to prison for a substantial amount of time can bring some comfort and justice has been done. Cumbria Constabulary is committed to thoroughly and compassionately investigating all reports of serious offences, no matter how much time has passed. I would encourage anyone who has been a victim of assault to contact police so that our officers can investigate. A man who was stopped by officers as part of a local initiative, Clear Hold Build, has been jailed for 2 years or 1 month for drug offences. Christianos, 28 of no fixed abode, was sentenced to Crown Court for possession of a controlled substance, Class A, and possession of intent to supply Class A drugs. This was stopped by officers at a petrol station in Ulverston in August this year. He was asked to step out of the vehicle by officers, and upon getting out of the vehicle, a snap-lock bag containing white powder was found on the driver's seat where he sat. Whilst conducting a search of the vehicle at Barrow police station, officers found a small black plastic box with a magnet on near to the spare wheel of the boot. Inside the box, officers located a further quantity of snap-lock containing Class A drugs. This was also not the registered owner of the vehicle, therefore the vehicle was seized from his possession. Lauren McKee said, "We proactively work to identify and challenge anyone we suspect of supplying drugs in our community, and Mr. Kalpaxis is exactly the type of offender that the Clear Hold Build initiative aims to target." Cumbria Police will continue to do everything in our power to tackle harmful activity such as this and take harmful drugs off our streets. This conviction sends a clear message to those involved in drug dealing in our area, pursue you and bring you to justice. Clear Hold Build is a 3-phase initiative which is known locally as Happy, Hopeful, Hindpool. The strategy will see criminals and their associates targeted and cleared from the Hindpool area through a persistent police presence and intelligence-led operations, all supported by partners and residents. A group who conspired to burgle homes in North Cumbria, jailed after appearing at Carlisle Crown Court. Fiona Manoli, 35, of no fixed abode, was sentenced to 17 months in jail. Eon Baban, 39, of Spring Gardens, Shrewsbury, was sentenced to 2 years and 4 months. Antonio Badger, 33, of no fixed abode, was sentenced to 3 years and 2 months. Oman Lovi, 30, of Worcester Road, London, was sentenced to 2 years and 8 months. Miriam Avamori, 27, of Clay Lane, Coventry, was sentenced to 17 months. The group targeted homes in Carlisle, Hayton and Bothell between the 29th of May and 4th of June. On the evening of the 4th of June, officers received a report of burglary after 3 men were disturbed in an address on Longsland Road, Carlisle. The men left the scene via Rickaby Park. Detectives obtained CCTV from the property which showed the 3 men entering the garden and forcing entry to the property via a kitchen window before being disturbed 6 minutes later and can be seen running out of the property. Following the report, the homeowner informed officers of being followed home earlier that week by a silver VW Golf. Investigations were carried out and the vehicle was found to have been in the Carlisle area at the time of the incident, along with another vehicle, a red Toyota Yaris. Information on the vehicles was passed to the neighbouring police forces and Lancashire police stopped the silver VW Golf in the early hours of the 5th of June. The vehicle was being driven by Mr. Badger and Miss Avamori was also in the vehicle. In her possession was a Louis Vuitton bag, a wallet and jewellery. Also found was a beige cap which matched that seen on CCTV at the targeted property. The wallet matched the description of that taken from the property. Also found in the vehicle was a black suitcase containing a number of items including vintage cameras, binoculars, ornamental knives and ornamental guns, and antique maps and documents. The red Toyota Yaris was tracked by Cheshire Police and CCTV found 3 occupants leaving the vehicle who were arrested at a nearby hotel. Items found in that hotel room were bank cards of the names of the victims and other items that had been taken. Items found in the VW Golf were confirmed as connected to burglaries at properties on Park Road Estate in Bothell between the 29th of May and the 1st of June and in Hayton on the 1st of June. PC Joseph Tidmarsh from Cumberland CID said, "Those committing burglary offences, like in this case, can expect us to work with other forces to track those involved, continue to target burglars with Operation Themis, our response and focus on burglaries. Being a victim of burglary can be incredibly traumatic and we are committed to working with communities to bring offenders to justice." A man has been jailed for drug supply after a vehicle was stopped on the M6 and a large amount of cannabis located. Bartosz Dujaki, 25, of Tom Bridget Road, Maidstone, appeared at Carlisle Crown Court to be sentenced. He was sentenced to 3 years for possession with intent to supply a controlled drug of Class B cannabis and carry Class B drugs with the intent to invade prohibition of importing. He pleaded guilty to the offence. The court heard on the 9th of August this year, officers noticed a vehicle travelling southbound on the M6 south of Carlisle, which was driving erratically and apparently excessive in speed. Officers stopped the vehicle, of which Mr. Dojaki was the front seat passenger. A large amount of luggage was in the vehicle. Mr. Dojaki having reported to having travelled from Thailand to go airport and was travelling to his home at the time the vehicle was stopped. Mr. Dojaki told officers the luggage, 2 suitcases and a duffel bag within the vehicle belonged to him, and when asked to open the coded locks, he claimed he didn't remember them and planned to break them open when he got home. Officers managed to open one of the bags and found a number of vacuum sealed bags inside which appeared to be cannabis, and he was arrested. 2 suitcases were searched and contained a total of 48 kilos of cannabis. Dojaki's mobile phone was examined by officers and confirmed he had travelled recently from Thailand to Scotland. The messages found supported Mr. Dojaki had imported the cannabis. The messages are as follows: "As long as there's no smell," or "You're gonna get a taxi to Mackey's or something. Best to get away from there," referring to the airport. "Just because I know old Bill float about." "Okay bro, yeah." Told the guy only to use routes that don't get searched. Other messages found suggested that Mr. Dojaki was intended to supply the cannabis to another party. Detective Constable Lewis Young from Cumberland's Community and Serious Organised Crime Unit said, "We proactively work to identify and challenge anyone suspected of being involved in the supply of drugs. Thanks to the vigilance of the officer who identified reasons to the suspicion of the vehicle travelling through Cumbria, he was able to stop the vehicle containing a significant amount of cannabis. To light, Mr. Dojaki Mackey's offending following an investigation which made it clear he had imported cannabis and intended to supply it to another party. A man from Barrow was jailed for blackmail after he targeted a pet owner appealing for information on a missing dog on social media. Brandon Wolveridge, aged 25, of Melbourne Street, Barrow, pleaded guilty at Preston Crown Court to blackmail and was sentenced to 2 years and 3 months. Mr. Wolveridge got the victim's number from an online appeal, ringing the victim on the 21st of September, asking if they were the owner of a dog called Rufus. When the victim said yes, Mr. Wolveridge made demands over the phone saying, "It's going to cost you £1,000 to get the dog back, but how do I know you won't call the police?" The victim received a further phone call from Mr. Wolveridge 3 days later on the 24th of recorded the conversation, aware of a similar scam in 2021 and last year, and had a similar call recognising the voice. Mr. Wolveridge demanded £1,000 in return for the missing pet and wanted half the money up front and the rest when the dog was dropped at the vet's. He refused to send images of the dog, saying the victim could take them to the police, and then asked how he knew he was going to get the rest of the money from the victim. He provided her with bank details, saying he would ring her back after the initial payment, and the victim called the police and shared the recording. Detective Sergeant James Ainston said Mr. Wolveridge was targeting vulnerable pet owners by demanding money for safe return of the pet, knowing fine well he did not have possession of the animal. We are thankful for the vigilance and cooperation of the victim in the case, who was able to recognise Mr. Wolveridge's voice and make recordings of the call. We understand losing a pet can be really upsetting for the people. Unfortunately, some people like Mr. Wolveridge will try and exploit this. We offer the following advice if you have lost a pet. Do not send money or rewards to people without confirming the safe possession of your animal. Ask for confirmation such as a video call, photographs and full details of the person who claims to have found your animal. If you have any doubts or receive any threats or demands about your pet, call Cumbria Police. 2 men have been jailed at Carlisle Crown Court for robbery after they targeted a man with a samurai sword and an axe. Alfie McIntosh, 21, of Raffles Avenue, Carlisle, was jailed for 3 years and 9 months for robbery. Ryan Warby, 23, of Newcastle Street, Carlisle, was jailed for 3 years and 10 months for robbery and possession of an offensive weapon. Both pleaded guilty to the offence. It heard that on the 22nd of March this year, police received a 999 call from the victim, who said he was robbed by 2 males identified as Mr. McIntosh and Mr. Warby. The victim was walking home through a cut between Osborne Avenue and Priory Road when he felt a tap on the shoulder and felt a presence behind him. Turning around, he has seen one of the males is carrying a samurai sword, which he describes as being large in size. The males asked for the victim's property, where he handed over his headphones, rucksack and phone. The second male was further up the alleyway holding some type of weapon. Mr. McIntosh and Mr. Warby have then shouted at their victim, telling him to empty his pockets, which only contained a key and a lighter. Speaking on the case, Detective Constable Sarah Brooks said, Mr. Warby and Mr. McIntosh put the victim through a horrific ordeal which left him fearful. Armed with weapons, they were intent on causing their victim fear. Offensive of this nature are unacceptable, and today's sentence reflects the seriousness taken by the court, and that we will do everything we can to bring criminals to justice. A man who admitted causing death by careless driving whilst over the drink drive limit has been jailed. Stuart Lidgo, 43, formerly of Frizzington, but now of Saltash Road, Keom, Plymouth, admitted the offence last month and was sentenced at Carlisle's Crown Court. The court heard how Mr. Lidgo's Ford Fiesta had collided with motorcyclist Raymond Hamill, aged 75, on the B5300 near Maryport Golf Club on the 11th of September. Mr. Hamill suffered extensive injuries in the collision and was taken to hospital by air ambulance. He died on the 14th of September, 3 days after the collision. Mr. Lithgow was subjected to a roadside breath test following the collision and was more than twice the legal limit. Witnesses also noted Mr. Lithgow's aggressive driving prior to the collision, with one describing the manner of driving as idiotic and recalling how they had told their partner moments before the crash, "I don't know what he's playing at, he will cause an accident." In his police interview, Mr. Lithgow had told officers he was drinking the night before, but couldn't understand why he was still over the limit. He had denied he had drunk alcohol on the day of the collision. Mr. Lithgow was sentenced to 6 years in prison. He will also be banned from driving for 6 years upon release and must sit an extended test to regain a licence. Detective Sergeant Deborah Story of Cumbria's Police Serious Collision Investigation Unit said, "This was a completely avoidable and tragic collision which resulted in a man suffering horrendous injuries and ultimately losing his life. The driver was significantly over the drink drive limit at the time of the collision, and multiple witnesses described him driving aggressively, particularly in his overtaking, prior to colliding head-on with Mr. Hamill's motorbike. There was nothing Mr. Hamill could do to avoid the collision. It is my hope that this case at least serves as a reminder to all road users of the dangers of driving whilst impaired by drink or drugs."